Hi, if you're like me, you can get very distracted when in the process of making music. Aside from life getting in the way of your creative flow, there are many other musical things that can get in your way and affect your output while working. If you're still like me, you are completely on your own musically and you don't have a strong connection to a singular process that defines your workflow. This comes with some benefits though. The first being that you stay fresh and somewhat creatively alert. When you aren't bound by a singular workflow, there are many types of things that you can utilize and find yourself utilizing without even realizing it that can greatly benefit your creativity. Things such as starting at a different point in a song, restarting a song, starting a song and then starting another song halfway down the track and merging them somewhere, and that's pretty fun to do, although for the sake of cohesiveness, maybe not. But if you're still like me and you're in progressive metal, then maybe it's a-okay to do that. And the second way you can benefit from that is if you don't hold yourself to finishing a track before you start another, you can have a plethora of songs that you haven't used yet and might come in handy down the road. Now, while they might not, it can sometimes be good to have a bunch of leftover riffs from something that you now know will not come out. However, as amazing as those can occasionally be, it is no wonder that sometimes it becomes a bit overwhelming when faced with a goal that you will meet. For instance, I just released my latest album, Brother Machine, which you can find on virtually all streaming services. When writing BM, I found myself very uncertain, very often in many ways. The future was very unclear to me. There were many times where I thought it wouldn't even be worth it to release this album because possibly the people that heard it would just hate it. I now know that that was not the case. But in the heat of the moment, when knee-deep in writing an album that nobody has heard, it's very easy to fall into that pitfall. The quality of your music can really distract you. You can think, this is terrible. You can have days where you listen to your music and you think, this is amazing. This is the best thing I've ever done, and it might actually be pretty damn good. There are days when you can listen to your music and think, this is really bad, man. This is not where it's at. It flip-flops, and I usually find the answer is somewhere in between. Now, hopefully, erring more towards the side of this is really good than bad, but you know what? That's just part of it. The way you think about the choices that you've made can also affect how you feel about your music. If you have really poured your heart into your album, then you can really start to question exactly where your heart lies and exactly where you want it to go. You can start to question, what's the purpose of releasing this if it just pains me to even write it? For me, this tends to go almost hand in hand with questioning my own skills as a producer, a musician, and a mixing engineer. While I'm definitely no mix engineer and my album does sound like a 21-year-old mixed it in his basement, I'm still very proud of it and I think I did the best that I could with the equipment and skills that I currently have. Just try to tell yourself that though, when knee-deep in the process of either producing, writing, or mixing. It's near impossible to convince yourself that it's okay to not be as good as those you look up to. All of these things combined with minimal success in the industry led to a large period of time where I was awestruck at the size of the hole that I had dug myself into. Many times I wanted to forget the album, stop playing music, and go do other things. This, as far as I can tell, is completely normal, but it's very hard to remind yourself of that while in the process. Given that I released the album, I feel I am somewhat qualified to speak on this subject in the hopes that I can help someone out who may be going through similar hardships. However, to do that, I really gotta get into the ways that you can meet adversity from within while making music. The most frequent thing that I encounter is thoughts such as, I'm not good enough, or what am I even doing? What am I doing trying to make an album, trying to mimic the greats, when I'm just this one guy sitting in my basement? I've only been playing guitar for 6 years, or 7 years now, I forget. What's going on? What's going through my head? Is this narcissism? Is this overinflated ego for some reason? Another very dangerous thought to have is that there's nothing that you can achieve from this. It can be very easy to convince yourself that there's no sort of cathartic release that's going to come from within. There's no way to get over your problems by doing this, and that nobody's going to appreciate it for what it is. While unfortunately, that may be true, and believe me, I've been there. It's still very important to keep in mind that it definitely won't happen if you don't release it, and if you don't keep pushing yourself. Now, that thought, once conquered or once taken far enough, leads to this is no longer how I feel. When doing a very emotional work like Brother Machine, there were many times where I felt myself starting to get better. And through that, I realized this is no longer the album that I need to make, and I made some very bad decisions by forcing myself to get back in this extremely negative mindset in order to finish the album. While I don't think it was wise, I think it's definitely something that led to the finishing of the album, and the finished product, I must say, I am very proud of. Not that that's a good thing to do, however, because the more that you chase that rabbit down that rabbit hole, you will end up landing on the thought that I have nothing to add to an unfinished product. And that's a pretty dang terrible feeling to have. When you realize that what you wanted to release isn't finished and yet you have nothing else to add to it because you're not in the same place. Now that's a very dangerous thing to end up at, especially if your album relies upon you feeling a certain way. And like I said previously, I've been there and I've ended up having to force myself back into a place that I no longer exist in. And that's not a very fun thing to do. And I think a lot of that is because I didn't attach myself to a certain workflow that permitted me, or at least restricted me, to working and finishing a single song or a single album before starting new things. I have dozens upon dozens of things that aren't finished and probably never will be because I can't bring myself to finish something that I no longer feel. Even now, after releasing the album, I've found next to nothing. I have nothing to say for it, I have nothing to add, nothing's been added for it. There's just an album out there in a name that nobody knows, that no one will probably ever know. And that's kind of sad, but you kind of have to just keep yourself away from thinking like that. Because it's not fun to think like that. And it's not okay to treat yourself like that. You have to accommodate yourself. You have to be gentle with yourself. It's okay to take breaks. It's okay to feel like, I don't want to work on music. I want to go play a game. Or I want to do something else. Or today really sucked at work, so I'm going to take more time to do the things that help recharge me than anything. And maybe that is music, and you're very lucky if it is music. However, you can also be very unlucky. Because no matter what you want to do, your mind might decide that's not what you're going to do. And you might end up just sitting on the couch eating chips for 3 hours. So what do you do? What on earth can you possibly do when you're met with all this, and you're still working on the same music that you were when you really weren't going through this stress and this uncertainty and this unease surrounding your album? Aside from taking breaks, aside from talking to people about it, which it's very hard to find resources on, which is one of the reasons that I decided to make this video, is it's very hard to find anybody talking about this, at least that I have seen. I hate to use this in fear of it sounding like a cop-out, but to this day, the best advice that I've ever received is you've just gotta keep doing it. You can't stop. Keep playing your guitar, and you'll find your voice. You'll find that place once again. And maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing, because maybe that place that your music was coming from was a very dark and angry part of yourself, a very insecure part of yourself. And even if that's no longer how you feel, maybe the goal of the album is healing. Maybe that's where the album ends. Maybe there's a certain point where you had to keep working on it, even though you no longer felt the way you were in the first half of the album, where you have to realize it's time to get better. and that will be the album, that will be the journey. And to be honest, I kind of wished that I did that, instead of forcing myself back into a place that I no longer felt comfortable at, instead of staring down these emotions that were now alien and obscene to me. So please, dear listener, keep working on things and be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself as well as the people around you. Everybody goes through this, be it musical or not. Everybody goes through it, artistic or not, conscious or not. People are going through this every single day around you. There's no news, it's nothing. This has been this way since the beginning of consciousness, most likely. And that's okay, because there's nothing that can be done about it. If your brain's telling you to stop doing it, then stop doing it, but don't forget about it. Try and come back to it. Challenge your mind, but don't force it. That can be a very painful thing to do. I have many friends who are going through this at the same moment, and I am always disappointed that I feel like I have nothing to say on it, other than that's just part of it. And I think that's the best advice that I can give, instead of trying to sell you something or trying to give you something that I don't even know will work, because I haven't encountered anything that will work. It's just all a part of the process. As ugly as it is, it's what it's all about. This is not easy. This will never be easy. But as far as I've came, as far as I've struggled and reached, this is as hard as it gets. Now I'm faced with writing a new album. Another one, which I don't know if anybody will appreciate. And that's okay, because once again, that's part of it. That's life, I guess. That's what we're taught to believe, that it's just all a big part of life, and you shouldn't talk about it. But here I am talking about it, and I'm telling you that you are not alone. And that it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be upset, it's okay to not know what the heck you're doing, because that is part of it, and it's a beautiful part of it. If you step aside from yourself and your own emotions and gaze into the uncertainty and gaze into not knowing what you want to reach, but knowing that it's there and that you can reach it, or maybe probably could reach it. That's what music is all about. That's what the art is all about, is trying to reach something that you don't currently have. You've got to keep striving for it. You've got to do that album. Let yourself be distracted. Think, I'm going to make a jam band instead of finishing this album. That's okay. Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. And eventually you'll come back to it. And if you don't, then that's okay, because you've kept doing it for so long that you've already got this amazing portfolio. So keep doing it. Even if this is your first album, I hope, and God, I hope so hard that this has been helpful to you. Because you're not alone. You are never alone in this. There are millions of people just like us all over. Billions even, I would say. This is just one of the ugly facets of life itself mirrored in your creative process. You'll find yourself going through the same things with work, with school, with day-to-day chores, with life, with everything. There's good days, there's bad days, there's some really bad days, there's some really good days. You just gotta ride that out, and that's music for you. Now, once again, I would like to emphasize not to push yourself and not to hurt yourself when trying to do this. If it's not coming, then don't try and force it. And if you're forcing it, stop doing that. I think that's about everything I have to say on this. I hope you can really find something in this video that you liked a lot. Stay tuned till next time, and we'll see what's what.